thank you, thank you. I'm really digging the AI introduction. I think I need that in every meeting before I walk in. It's fantastic. And great to see a full room of people. So just for the benefit of the newcomers or the new seaters here, just a little intro on DEPT. We are a marketing and technology services company. We provide digital solutions to clients all around the world, clients like we're happy to have clients in the technology space, in the healthcare space, and some of you are here today, but we're really excited, and this is the third sort of session that we have. First, we started to talk, we had a panel here that was talking about transformation in business and how AI sort of is accelerating transformation. We had some fantastic insights from the panel. The most recent panel that we just finished was all about creativity and how AI can help amplify creativity in creating those personalized moments and those personalized connections that can kind of spur growth for our clients. But it wouldn't be anything without having, media at the core of what we're doing and how AI can really help drive media performance. So I'm going to introduce Sam in a little bit to introduce the panel, but I want to just cue a little video for us to watch just before we do that.
At DEPT, we know media is evolving, faster, smarter, sharper, and AI is at the heart of it all. AI turns data into precision targeting, real-time decisions, and stories that actually connect. This isn't media as you know it, it's media that works harder. We are DEPT. We create pioneering work that unlocks tomorrow's possibilities for today's most ambitious companies. We deliver technology and marketing services to clients across the globe. And we're shaping the future of media with smarter strategies and sharper execution. Let's explore how AI is transforming media and redefining audience engagement.
Well, thank you. And I just want to introduce Sam Huston, who's going to take us through and introduce our panelists. Thank you, Sam.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very, very much for taking some time out of your very, very busy CES schedules to sit with us and have a conversation with us around AI and media. For me, this is a conversation that's over 100 years in the making. I come from a family of advertisers. My great-great-grandfather was an illustrator almost 100 years ago. He did the original Morton Salt illustration. My grandfather, his son, spent his life in print advertising. My father is about to retire from a 50-year career in radio, and I've spent half of my career in traditional media, or a third of my career in traditional media, a third of my career in digital media, and I'm super excited about the next third, which is all going to be driven by AI in media. And it's not lost on me that we are sitting on the precipice of the next evolution of what's possible in media, driven by AI. And I'm super excited to have a really fun conversation with a couple of my very good friends and clients and coworkers about where that's going. So I'd like to welcome Paul Longo. He's the General Manager of AI and Ads for Microsoft. Spends a lot of time working with brands in terms of how to bring AI into ads, how to think about audiences differently. And then Terri Wang, who leads growth for OpenAI. Terri is a client and a good friend of DEPT, and really excited to have a great conversation around what's happening in ad tech, what's happening in media, and how AI is transforming what we're doing. And so, Paul, I'd like to start with you. How have you seen AI disrupt media in the last year? Obviously, the last year was critical as everyone is experimenting, everyone's trying new things. What are you most excited about? What do you expect in the next year?
Thanks, Sam. Great to be here, especially with two great partners. Love your intro. I'm the first person in my family to go into advertising in this business. My parents were New York City school teachers, but we all have a lot to learn about AI. So maybe that's the connection in terms of that background. And in my role, which is a relatively new role, so it's a role that got created about 6 months ago. So usually when I tell people my title, they're like, "That's really cool, but what the heck does that mean?" And it kind of ties into, I think, some of the change dynamics that we're trying to keep up with. So I think the two biggest elements of change, one is just like the shift in eyeballs, right? So, 2024 was a monumental year in terms of AI assistant usage. So on the Copilot side, we delivered over 13 billion chats. We created over 12 billion images. And, that consumer engagement and that tie-in between an AI assistant experience plus search, we saw that accelerate consumer journeys in a way that was incremental to just a search experience on its own. So we see the eyeballs going there, but we also see it impacting, how consumers are actually engaging with brands, with products, how their purchase cycle is looking. The second piece, which ties into the other part of my job, is around efficiency. And I think we've all seen this in the past, in the past year. And if you think about it, ChatGPT is only 2+ years old. Copilot is just 1+ year old. Like, we weren't even talking about this stuff on the stage at CES in like 2021. And from an efficiency standpoint, we're saying in our team at Microsoft that, we're really moving from this era of promise to practice. And 2024, I think, was a really pretty big leap forward in getting to more of a practice state. I will credit Sir Martin Sorrell. He had one of the most elegant ways of framing up kind of where we are in the AI journey, which was in 2023 was a year of wow, 2024 was a year of how and experimentation, and 2025 is a year of now. And I think we're really moving, we're at that point. We launched efficiency tools in our Microsoft advertising platform a year ago that didn't exist. So creative generation, campaign diagnostics, we have a Copilot functionality. So if you're an account manager and you're planning a campaign through Microsoft advertising, you have a virtual assistant that can help you to launch and optimize that campaign. All that didn't exist a year ago. So I think those are the two biggest change dynamics.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think it's an important point. And while the efficiency point is very interesting and the increased productivity aspect of this is also exciting, I think there's some real benefits around the data side of it and how we're using data to be smarter, to maximize our investments from a media perspective. I think this is something you and I talk a lot about, Terri, as we think about bringing OpenAI into media and how we can start to use all the data that's available to us in the smartest way possible. And so, we don't want to limit the conversation to just how it is, building in automation, changing workflows, those types of things. But, how do brands strike that right balance between efficiency and performance? And what have you seen, Terri, as we start to move into a media world with OpenAI?
Yeah, no, that's great to be here. Thank you for having me. Good to connect. And I think the main thing that we're thinking about, at least from an OpenAI standpoint, is we really see this tool as a force multiplier for, I want to say, like the proprietary data and the creativity and like the human elements of whatever brand exists. And I think one of the things that's really cool is that we are still, I guess, still in experimentation in terms of finding how we can add value to more users and customers. So as we're on this journey, I think the main thing to take away is that we definitely want to ensure whatever we're doing from a performance and efficiency standpoint still retains human in the loop. I think focusing on leveraging the efficiency part for leveraging AI for efficiency on things that are repetitive tasks. We just launched Search, which helps us find more timely, relevant, helpful content in a way that is more broadly accessible and more direct. How can we leverage those insights in a way that's helpful? And then I would say from the performance side, I guess it'll be increasingly important to think about your overall data strategy and plug in AI throughout that whole ecosystem from a brand standpoint. So whether that's social, search, paid media, all those things, I think it's important to connect those journeys. And AI should really be with you throughout that whole step, all steps of the journey. And I think that's where there's a lot of opportunity this year.
I couldn't agree more. And I think one of the things that I find most interesting about the conversations we've been having too is that as we move into this sort of post-personalization era where timeliness becomes more important than personalization, that data strategy is critical, because it's in that timeliness that allows us to bring in elements that people find value in, and in creating that sort of value exchange between delivering information that's relevant and meaningful to them in that moment becomes way more important than anything we can do from a personalization perspective. I think you've got some really cool things on the Microsoft side that are enabling us to do that as you stitch together that data.
Yeah, the Microsoft side, we have this saying now that AI is the new UI across all of our Microsoft platforms. And when you think about the various Microsoft canvases from Bing to Xbox to MSN, we're integrating Copilot as an AI thread across those experiences. And AI is enabling platforms and publishers to become smarter about their users. And I think we're becoming these personalized content curators and creating much more personalized experiences. And if if your Xbox experience can pull in your experience on Copilot, that just creates a more dynamic connection between us and our consumers.
Yeah, it's huge. The stitching of data together that you're doing is absolutely incredible. I think it's truly amazing. And I think one of the things that enables us to do is to create those really powerful ad experiences and to deliver messages in real time. But I'm curious to, how do we, one of the things that we also all know is that there is magic in advertising, and maintaining that magic and finding those things that create that spark is a real challenge for brands. And as we move into a world where content is generated by machines, driven by data, how do we maintain that spark? And how do you see brands balancing that in the day-to-day between that emotional resonance, but also providing the data necessary to be timely?
Yeah, I think this is a challenge. It's not a new challenge for us. And if we think about performance marketing and brand marketing, especially over the past 10 or 15 years, I think we've lost a little bit of our creative edge when it comes to performance marketing, right? And I think conversations have been too much about the integration and the stack and the clicks. And, we've really lost sight about, the creative brief, right? And to me, I still think the creative brief is king or queen. And, when you're looking at executing on a creative brief, we should be, to Terri's point about the human element, we should be looking at a creative brief saying how do we amplify that, right? The question shouldn't be, let's not use AI to cut corners. It's how do we maximize the outputs of this brief to do something that's even more special?
And something to add just in terms of the creative process, I think AI can really, or at least a lot of these technologies, can really enable, I want to say multimodal experiences, thinking about that experience both through voice as well as through different visual channels. And then technologies that enable trans creation in a way that's different, and translations, that's obviously something that still requires human in the loop to really make sure that message resonates with a global audience. And I see ChatGPT or other AI providers even just helping to make that more democratized and accessible. And that's something that we hope continues to evolve, and then the creativity can kind of expand even to smaller brands. Everyone can kind of essentially level the playing field a little bit more.
Yeah, that level playing field is particularly interesting and the democratization that happens, giving everyone tools, changes the story of the narrative. The thing that's still required is the ad tech piece, and the ad tech piece that supports all of that. How do you see the ad tech ecosystem evolving? What do you think needs to change from an ad tech perspective as we think about supporting the data that's required, feeding that data into large language models that enable our teams to act smarter and faster?
It's an interesting question. I think what's happening, AI is creating a certain level of fluidity in campaign planning and execution. And when you think about just the vast amount of data that an advertiser has, and all the channels that they are leveraging to utilize to engage with their consumers, AI could really do that in a fluid way, right? It could access all the data across these various sources. It could optimize and make sure that the next dollar spent is going to the most effective channel. I think some of the challenges, though, are teams and organizations aren't fluid yet, right? So I think that there's some silos in terms of where data exists. There's also silos in terms of how an advertiser or an agency is structured. And I think there's just a gradual evolution, right? I think we're all used to working a certain way, but I think there's a level of fluidity that needs to be to break down some of those silos, I think, on the advertiser side.
Yeah, and Terri, I think what we're seeing through our work with OpenAI is that there is more customization that's required. I think there is, as we think about bringing OpenAI into media, there is some custom builds that we need to do to make sure that the data is surfaced in the right way, and I think that's going to apply to all brands.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think there's a lot of capabilities built into these AI tools, and it's almost like helping others with this adoption curve, and it varies a lot by industry and by customers and just meeting them where they are. So I know there's impatience for kind of ROI and results now, but there's also this kind of importance in bringing along and upskilling the workforce to see these features and be flexible and adapt to them. So like an example is, recognizing that some of these things are in silos. We launched Canvas. It's going to be like more of a real-time collaboration or interface. There's things that will be a lot more visual there. How do we make sure those things enable like more AI native collaboration? And that's something that we need to continue to do. From even like a customs instruction standpoint, a lot of people aren't aware of that, but like making sure your brand voice and tonality, all those things are like encoded and aligned, and just being transparent and like having a clear goal and I want to say like principles about how you approach that, and then letting people experiment and like be creative within those constraints. I think that can foster a lot of innovation, but also like help bring along everyone in this journey and upskilling. And that includes myself, right? There's a lot to learn.
Yeah. And I think that brings up a great point that no one here understands all of it. All of us need to go through a series of upskilling. All of us need to learn more about it. And the only way for us to do that, and the only way for us to plot the way forward is through collaboration. And I think it's super cool that we're up here together. I think the collaboration between OpenAI is really cool. I think the collaboration between brands, agencies, and platforms is super cool. How do you see that transforming where marketing is going, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, we're early in the week at CES, but I think one of the things that I'm most inspired about is just like multidisciplinary conversations around AI and where things are going and how we could evolve and elevate together. And we just started working with the IAB and their AI working group, and they're launching at the IAB ALM conference at the end of the month an AI readiness guide, kind of a V1, which I think is going to help create some standards, some direction, some questions for brands to ask. So I think we're at the early point as far as some industry standardization. And while that doesn't sound like super sexy, like that's what is needed to really scale. So I think the more that we could get together in forums like this, with publishers, with advertisers, with the creative community, that's what's really going to help us, bring the industry forward.
Are there particular industries that you see that are more poised for this type of transformation, or more poised to lean in, better positioned to take advantage of AI? I think in the business transformation one we had this morning, we saw a wide variety of clients, but I'm curious if there's specific sectors that might be more open to AI transformation or bring AI into what they're doing from a targeting perspective.
Yeah, I mean, certainly it applies everywhere. We're seeing a lot in the shopping space and in retail, and I think that's one that pops. But I think that there's certainly applicability cross vertical.
Yeah, definitely. And what major shifts do you think they should be expecting over the next 2 years? Are there big changes as we look 2 to 3 years out that might influence how we're thinking about ad tech and how we're building that into what we're doing from a media perspective?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing with this new, what I would call a conversational canvas, is that there's a fine balance between advertising impact and maintaining consumer trust. And we look at a metric called successful session rate. And so we want to make sure that, that a successful session is just as successful with ads as without ads, or even, so that ads are additive to that experience. So we're currently testing out new ad experiences. We're flighting something that's called Ad Voice right now, which is a kind of connective text that shows the consumer why an ad is there and how it's connected to the conversation. And we're seeing that really pop and score well in terms of consumer trust and successful session rate. And we're testing out some other brand immersive experiences as well. And, an agentic future, I know that is a buzzword right now, but that's something it's where, we firmly believe that in the future, not so distant future, we'll all have more personalized AI companions that will be able to interact with a brand AI agent on our behalf. And so that might be something a few years out,
sooner than we think, yeah.
But I think it'll be here sooner than we think. And just at a high level, this is the most I've been excited about advertising probably in my career, and that we're looking at just totally new ways to engage. So I think it's very refreshing that in the conversation that we're having, it's not just the same old. It's not just the standard units. We're really talking about breaking boundaries, in this space.
It's a really cool time for OpenAI to enter the advertising world, Terri. So I'm curious, as you think about, as we move into what media looks like and advertising looks like for a brand like OpenAI, what are the changes you're making? How are you breaking down the silos internally? And what are you most excited about?
I would say, I think it's definitely new territory for us. We definitely have more of a beginner's mind in terms of what disruptions could happen in this space. The main thing I think to take away is that we still see that there is, I want to say this future where you have a creative director kind of thought partner that can sit alongside you, but defining the goals and the principles from an organizational standpoint, I think that's really important to have that structure, so you can really stay aligned and still enable grassroots experimentation. We're very bottoms up, research, try new things culture. So I think that's something that we want to continue to foster. We're also very much a test and iterate culture. So I think something in the future that will just become more and more important is the rapid experimentation and flexibility to test. What are you actually optimizing for and why? And that's where I think decision-making needs to be focused in terms of why are you doing what you're doing, and the how and the what might become more automated or, whatever is the technology of the future. And the processes and the foundations we're setting up now, I would operate with the assumption that the intelligence is going to get better. But the actual why of why we're doing these things, I think that's the constant dialogue that should persist.
Yeah, 100%. It's really cool to hear you say that, because I think as much as things have changed, they're staying the same in some ways. And so having that alignment on goals, understanding why we're doing something, having a vision in place, putting that compass and radar in place to make sure that we understand where we're going and how we're going to get there is just as important as it always has been. What do you think there are some of the other challenges that marketers are facing, and as we think about this next evolution of media and where it's going, and what advice do you have as we start to enter into this next evolution?
Upskilling, I think that is definitely a theme that resonates, and we've heard that in some of the conversations that the brand conversations that we've been having. We're working on an AI readiness guide that we're going to launch at the end of January, just to help brands get ready. So I think that, combined with some of these industry forums like the IAB is putting together, is going to help just collectively bring us along. I think that's a key challenge, and I think it's just usage, right? Like we talked about that, the wow to how to now, and getting people over that hump. I think skilling will do that. I think a lot of it is trial and error. I think I heard at the tail end of the last panel too, sharing best practices, how it's happening so quickly. It's use, iterate, share, learn, and so I think we need to get that that cycle going. We saw data that on the enterprise side, that AI usage went from 55% to 75%, which is a huge jump. But I think just the regularity of that usage and then moving that needle a little bit further, we see that happening in 2025.
I think this wouldn't be a media presentation or a media conversation if we didn't have an audience question, if we didn't have a question around brand. So, Terri, as a young brand, how do you see that changing? How important is the idea of brand in this AI evolution? How are you thinking about that from an OpenAI perspective?
I think we've primarily been focused on doing our research and deploying it and making it as accessible as possible. And I think that's where, I guess from a brand identity standpoint, I think authenticity is really important. If you saw our 12 days of Shipmas, there's a lot of just kind of the raw discovery and excitement. The wow factor, I think, is still very much there, and the excitement and energy in the space. And it's a very generalized product, which makes it both exciting and also, I want to say, hard. So to expect users to take this like blank slate and, come up with this now, ROI, there's also a challenge in that. So like culturally in the upskilling process, I think it's also being vulnerable and sharing like where things did not go well, like prompts that worked, prompts that didn't, like what, kind of new ways that you can use this essentially blank canvas, putting in like, whether it's a screenshot or something to like start brainstorming. I think there's a lot of that discovery process and authenticity around that is important. And I think, this year there might be a little bit more to come, but I would say right now the focus is in enabling everyone to be able to participate and access that in a democratized way.
There's a scariness too, I think, to the blank canvas, right? Like sometimes you come in and you see this box and it's like, oh, what do I do? And we started testing out like surfacing content and sample prompts that are customized to the user. We have something that we just launched called a Copilot Daily, where we're partnering with our publishers to service content, almost like a New York Times Daily type of like a rundown. Over time, we probably won't need those types of prompts, but I think we're trying to test out different ways to really draw in consumers and get that usage going.
And from a consumer perspective, when we think about audiences, obviously building audiences now is more complex and more interesting, and there's more data than we ever have had before to build that level of a very high level of segmentation. We're no longer talking to adults 25 to 54. We're not even just talking to moms. We're talking to moms of kids less than 2 years old who buy certain products. So how do you see brands navigating that world, Paul? How do they start to use that data in new ways? Is this promise of customized and sort of generative audience development in the future? Is it happening now? Where are we going with that?
I think it's happening now. I think some of the silos are part of the challenge, but I think there's a relevancy component that you brought it up earlier. So it's pairing what you know about that consumer with what's relevant in the moment and what's being asked in the conversation. And I think that is going to be the secret sauce going forward.
The data's there. It's really just getting that timeliness and working towards that level of timeliness that we've been talking about.
For sure.
Yeah. So, we are sitting on the precipice of something new and different and a huge shift in what's happening from a media perspective. Certainly, I think we all agree there's never been a more exciting time to be in media. The search landscape is incredibly exciting. Once again, it's the most dynamic part of advertising today in certain ways. If we were to come together 5 years from now, what and have this same conversation, what do you think we'll be talking about? What will we be looking back on that are sort of the highlights? What do we think the future holds for us?
5 years seems like almost like projecting 25 years out from what it used to be. I think the agentic future, I think that's going to be a real thing in 5 years. So I think that's something that will come to fruition. I think another thing just in terms of usage, and our CMO talked about this, is comparing it to just smartphone usage, where when smartphones first came out, they weren't completely essential, right? Like I remember my old Motorola StarTAC phone that I thought was really cool. And if you were going to the office and you left your, early days mobile phone at home, you'd say, all right, well, I'd still keep going to the office, and pick it up when you got back. Now there's no way that you wouldn't go back to pick up your smartphone, right? Just with all the apps, and it's just so essential to all of our daily lives. I think that's where AI is going. I think 5 years from now, AI is going to be an essential companion. We're all going to have our finely tuned, personalized AI assistants that we're not going to want to leave the house with, that they're going to help us to shop. They're going to help us to browse the web. They're going to help us to connect. So I think that's something that will come to fruition in 5 years as well.
So what does that mean for advertising?
I think in terms what that means for advertising is that how do you add value? How do you meet consumers where they're at? It's not going to be about billboards. It's going to be about I think we all see, like with some of the voice assistants today, like sometimes I get offers barked at me, right? But if that's your personalized companion that's barking orders at you, I love to use the analogy from one of my favorite movies, The Truman Show, and there's this moment where Jim Carrey goes to his wife, played by the wonderful Laura Linney, and he's having this epiphany and really figuring out what's happening to him. And she just barks out a Mococo Beans commercial to him. And it just like totally eroded the trust in that relationship, and things that, obviously you've seen the movie. In an AI assistant where that's your companion, you can't erode that trust. So there's going to be more of a balance and fine line than ever before between consumer trust with an AI companion and really surfacing ads that are relevant to that consumer.
Terri, what advice would you have for advertisers as we look towards this agentic future?
I think establishing your brand identity and your voice and how that shows up through multiple modalities will be increasingly important. I think the element of, I want to say, personalization and what customers are experiencing or your users may expect in terms of timeliness, relevancy, and helpfulness, that bar will continue to increase. But what does that really mean in the context of your product or your identity? I think that means very different things. So the more you understand that, I think timeliness, relevancy, and helpfulness will just continue to improve as the models continue to get more intelligent. I think also entry points and accessibility of that will just continue to expand. So you have to think about what makes sense in like the context of voice versus in like the tone and like the cultural context. I think the more you get ahead of that, you're setting yourself up for more, I want to say, robust of a longer term strategy, as there's so many unknowns. But if you have that identity and those values, then as the technology evolves, I think it just, continues to force multiply your impact in the world.
Yeah, that's super cool. I'd love the idea of the different modalities, but always going back to the what's central to your brand. And I think that's a really powerful advice for as we move forward. As much as things are changing, things are also staying the same, and making sure that we are building brands in the way that we've done it for hundreds of years is really important. So I think we have a couple minutes for questions. If anyone in the audience has a question. No questions. All right.
Oh, first one to break the ice.
Thanks. I was just wondering how the sharing of learnings of advertisers, both within verticals and thus potentially competitors, and then as well as across verticals, is going to be affected by the integration of tools like OpenAI, which obviously get trained on the interactions with advertisers.
It's an interesting question. I do think, from an agency perspective, it's a fine balance for us to strike between protecting our clients' data, but sharing learnings and experience. And I think, as we move into this even a more collaborative environment, I think it's through conversations like this where we can start to, that line becomes a little bit more clear for us, where we are sharing learnings, but not data. And I think we have to get comfortable leaning into that idea of we all have to learn, we all have to get smarter and better together. So let's define that line and those boundaries together without compromising the integrity of the idea, of the brand, of who that audience is. I think there's one more in the back, and then we'll get to. Yeah, I can hear you. I can repeat the question too.
What are your favorite use cases of AI by brands in the past little bit? So the most innovative or just the coolest?
Personally, I think the coolest uses of AI for brands are all around data. AI is very good at recognizing patterns that we as people can't recognize. And when you're investing hundreds of millions of dollars in media, the patterns that AI is able to find and the recommendations that they're able to make from an optimization perspective is absolutely incredible. And so to me, the sexiest uses are when we're using AI to recognize those patterns and then make recommendations on where we should make the next best investment. Those to me are the most valuable ones. They require humanity. They require a deep understanding of data, but they deliver real efficiency and performance to brands. And to me, those are the best uses of AI. I don't know if you guys have some.
A little controversial, but I'm going to say Coca-Cola. And I know Coca-Cola took some heat, but they put themselves out there, right? And they learned a ton. I think they put a pretty big step forward. So they're going to be able to go back, integrate those learnings. And I think that although they did take take a little bit of constructive criticism there, I think that they're ahead of their competitors in terms of leveraging AI to reach consumers.
I think we got one more. Yeah, you're good. Yeah, just go ahead.
So you guys talked about the kind of. Thank you. Hi, my name is Daniel. So you guys talked about the interconnectivity of AI, how from one session to another it'll remember and we'll all really enjoy having our little personalized assistants. Well, I don't know if I'm the only one, but I thought about as a consumer, I kind of like having split personalities sometimes where I might want it to remember anything. And when I use ChatGPT and it says memory updated, I'm like, well, I don't want you to necessarily remember that. So in the same way that search engines start to learn about us and then we open a private tab, is there going to be a future where there is a little bit more this one's not on the record and this interaction is on the record? Or are you going to pay attention to all of that because even that thinking is helpful?
I love it. It's actually this exact topic came up in a meeting that we were just having. We were talking about the enterprise version of Copilot and the consumer version of Copilot. And do you want your work self and your personal self to kind of coexist? I do think in the future there will be. I think we'll have multiple AI assistants or agents that we work with, and we probably, I think I'm the same way, right? The data that I want to upload to an enterprise, to the enterprise version of Copilot, a lot of times is proprietary. It's and it doesn't necessarily jive with what I want to do on the weekends or where I want to go on vacation. So I do think that we'll have a modality in terms of multiple assistants that we're engaging with.
Yeah, I'd echo that. I think my persona as a mom at home versus at work is very different. My preferences and probably my tone and things that I think about are really different. And I would think that as the product continues to evolve and if the user those user needs will exist, I think a lot of people have different personas. I can't really speak to if that's going to happen at any time soon, but I do think that's an important user need and highlighting it and being vocal about it is important. And then I would say just to the memory feature, I think you can actually delete but it's just obviously a lot more manual and some people don't necessarily know about that. And then obviously our different peers and packages acknowledge that for work versus personal, but I would think of a human as a human at the end of the day and how do we bring that together more holistically? So it's a really good point.
Well, great. Thanks again, everyone, for sharing your time with us. I hope you found it valuable. Really appreciate you coming out, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your CES.